I wanted to talk about kind of how I got started and who I am and what this all is. So I started as an audio engineer. I went to Madison Media Institute in 2013 to 2015, and I graduated with my associate degree in electronic audiovisual systems. And from very early on in my life, I realized that I love audio. I love the way well-produced music sounds, and that was something that really resonated with me, was well-produced music and like car audio. Back in when I was in high school, those days, car audio was a big thing. So like the bass and how well the sound was in the car and everything was a very inspirational thing for me. And so that's why I decided to continue to pursue my love for that. And I started with GarageBand and iMovie when I bought my first MacBook Air with my tax money, which is funny. And that changed my life. That MacBook Air completely changed my life. I started getting into like production and just realizing how much I enjoyed it and how much I loved it. And then I decided I wanted to go to Madison Media Institute and kind of tail off of all that stuff that I really loved. And I graduated, and shortly thereafter, I started a sound company. I first started running sound in a small bar and venue in Wisconsin, and it didn't take long for the bands to catch on, like, hey, she's a pretty good sound engineer. And I ended up quitting that gig to run full time, which is, on the weekends, like every weekend, with a country band. And that was pretty cool. So, I kind of took like the leap of faith, or like the risk, high risk, high reward type thing, to run sound for this band. And I was with them, I don't know for how long, maybe 6 months or something like that, or a whole festival season, like in the summer or whatever. And I decided, hey, I could do this for multiple bands and kind of build like a company out of it. So I ended up buying a bunch of speakers. So, my two 18-inch EV subwoofers that are fully powered, and then my fully powered 15-inch mains, and then 4 monitors. And it didn't start that way. I started with the mains, and then I ended up using somebody else's subwoofers, and it worked for the first show, but I'm like, I'm never doing that again. So I'm going to buy my own. So I ended up buying my own everything, lights, the whole shebang. And yeah, I ran sound for multiple, tons of different bands over the course of like 8 years. And yeah, it was great. Sometimes it can be stressful. I know my fellow sound engineers out there, that it can be definitely stressful at times, but other times it can be extremely rewarding, especially, when you have everything dialed in and everything sounds amazing and you're getting compliments, and you're just in the moment, and it feels so good to be behind the soundboard and able to help the musicians. And for me, it might just be my personality, but, I really loved running monitors. I liked making sure that my musicians could hear themselves. And so it was really like a customer service type of thing for me, almost. Like, I want to provide like the best service for these bands, and I want to provide the best quality for them to hear themselves, obviously, but also like the crowd behind, or in front of the band and in front of me too. And, over the years, I had this like old rusty, old faithful van, right? This old, white, long van, no windows or anything. And yeah, I had, all my equipment in there, and I would just drive to wherever the band is at. They would let me know ahead of time, sometimes months, sometimes weeks. Sometimes it would be a last minute show. And I would drive to where they were at, and I would set it up probably about 4 hours before the show started. And I would always have somebody with me. I always tried to hire somebody to help me. It was really heavy equipment, and being, especially in the like fall and winter times with the bar being, very maybe in not the greatest places, and just for safety reasons, it was nice to have somebody with me along with like carrying things. And yeah, that was good times. I ran sound mostly indoors in the winter, obviously, because I'm in Wisconsin, in Illinois, northern Illinois. And then in the summer, you get the big shows like the festivals or the charity events, which were really nice. I liked those a lot. And yeah, it was, I ran sound even throughout COVID. I think I had like 4 shows through COVID, which was very, interesting that I was even able to continue doing it through COVID. There was a story. There was a band that wanted me to run sound. They had this, it was like for a city hall. The city they had like a nightly band during the weekends, or like some sort of like Thursday night something. And this was during COVID, and I remember distinctively getting to the place that I was at that I was going to run sound. There was like a little like wooden stage, maybe like off the floor, off of the ground, and they painted squares. Like they used like spray paint in the grass, and they painted squares for where people could stand during the show, and it was just so like surreal and so interesting. Another show, it was at a really small bar and venue. They had a stage as well. It was tucked in the corner in Wisconsin, in southern Wisconsin. And, I'm wearing my mask and everything, and not a lot of people were. I think it was more, kind of like the rebels, like not wearing masks and stuff, but that was interesting. The other few shows, it was actually the night that they announced that they weren't going to be running. I mean, that the night that they announced that they were shutting everything down in Illinois, like I had a show, and I remember it was like, we're shutting everything down, all businesses, like nobody, it was like quarantine. And it was that, like I had a show that night. So it was, I was booked, and all the way till I ended, when I decided I didn't want to run sound anymore, when I made that decision, was the winter of 2023. I decided to run sound all the way throughout the year and stop like at the end of the year. And it was interesting because I had a show on the 30th, and I got asked for a show on the 31st. So, I mean, I was like in high demand for my sound. And I think really, like, obviously it's the technical skills, the technical abilities and everything like that. But I think overall, like, my advice and my tips for people that are wanting to be sound engineers and do careers in the sound industry is to really build relationships with the musicians and get to know them and, help them, offer that helping hand. Because that's going to go so far. And learn about them, learn what they like, learn what they don't like, and just continue to build that relationship, because, it will go very far, because they know that you're trying to take care of them. And if there is like a technical difficulty, you're up there, you're ready to go, you're ready to help them. I feel like a lot of with sound engineering and with bands, like there can be some disconnect, or there could be some like, headbutting in that sense. And, the way that I think my theory is for running sound is just to give them the best experience that they can. If they ask for something, if you can give it to them, give it to them. Help them out, be support. And, I think that goes a long way with anything with like leadership, really, and is just helping the person out, helping the people out, helping the band out, helping the business out. Because really, like, leadership isn't about pointing fingers and telling somebody you need to get this done. Like, leadership really is about helping the people that maybe they're not, as educated, maybe they don't have like as much experience or ability or whatever, and in no way am I saying that as like anything that's like bad, But, and even me, like, I need leadership, with things, and, I've needed leadership and everything, mentorship, and, it's amazing. It goes so long. It goes such a long way. And I think that being a good leader is somebody that, offers that help and that brings people up and pushes people up and helps them and supports them and cares about them, and, the people that may not know as much as you, teach them, be a good mentor, be a good teacher. And, that's what leadership is. Leadership should be a helping hand. And that goes along with my sound company, and me as leading the band, leading the sound, leading the crowd, leading how it's being portrayed to the masses. It really comes down to caring how the band feels, caring how the crowd is reacting, providing things, being happy to provide things like, oh, you need some gaff tape here, you need some duct tape or whatever. I have an extra stand. Let me run to my van. It's 2 blocks that way. Let me run to my van and grab it for you. It goes such a long way. It is so indescribably important to just care about people and show that you care. And especially if you want to be in those leadership positions or those business positions or, the sound company or owning a company or having clients, having bands, like you have to care about people and not just your clients. Don't just pretend, oh, I care about you. It really, really boils down to actually showing that you are actively caring and sharing and being there for these people. And not just the clients, like I said, no, your people that are behind you, people that are helping you, your team. Like, teamwork is so important. It goes such a long way. And that's another reason why I didn't like running sound alone. Like, I like to have somebody with me when I'm running sound. I think teamwork, having somebody to bounce ideas off of, somebody to lean on, they can lean on you, you can lean on them. And that's so important. It goes such a long way in leadership and business and, just having that. And that's why I love to have somebody with me so we could bounce ideas. Oh, maybe there's something that I'm missing because I'm not perfect. They're not perfect. Nobody's perfect, quite frankly. and having more than one brain, having more than one set of eyes and set of ears on something is so incredibly important. In my opinion, it is so important to have multiple people on a project that can put their eyes and their ears together, because there's things that people are going to miss. There's things that people maybe don't have that experience or the background or the culture maybe even. And to get that experience from those people and to grow as a team, you're learning, and it kind of goes along with like debate, like, when you debate and when you have something that, oh, maybe I have this belief or I have this, and you debate and you learn, you come to like a consensus. Hopefully, if it's a healthy debate, you come to this consensus. And that's with leadership. You listen to what your team is saying, you listen to what other people are saying, and you actually take that into consideration, because it is so important to get other perspectives on things. And with the sound company, I think, going back and circling back, it was so successful because I was able to listen. Not just how they sounded and how the band sounded. I listened to them when we spoke before the show started. I listened to what they like, what they don't like. I listened to their issues that they were having. Maybe they weren't having a good day. Maybe they were. Maybe they were having a great day. And just nurturing that is so important, to just nurture and to care about people. And, that's a lot of times in business, when you hear business, you're thinking like cold, like hard, like, no emotion, like let's not, bring emotion. And I agree. Like when you're in business, like bringing emotion, like don't sit here and cry, like if you're crying about something or, you're like just overly, emotional about this decision or something, like decisions need to be made logically and with ration. And that's why having rationales after you do anything, like especially written documentation, having rationales is so important, because you're giving it logical explanation. But you have to have emotion in business, and this is something that I stand by. You have to have emotion in business, because you're building relationships. And those relationships, the more genuine they are, the stronger the business is going to be. If you're completely cold and callous and you're building a relationship, it's not going to be genuine. That's why building a relationship, you have to have emotion in that. You have to care. And I guess this whole thing, really, you could say it's about care, because it matters. And even in business, and I'm an ENTJ. I'm the type of person that doesn't like to bring emotion into specific things. I don't like to show my emotion, and I'll admit that. And, that makes me good at business and stuff. But you don't have to show, you don't have to cry and be all, sappy and stuff. But you can still at least say, hey, I hear you and I hear your concern. Or, are you okay? Asking somebody if they're okay, if they seem like they're not okay. Do you need something? Like, just those little things, like, it shows that you care. And you don't have to be overly emotional about that. It's the gestures, it's the little things. And people pick up on that. And that is so huge with leadership and running a business and, running a sound company and helping bands and helping artists and clients and all of that. And so I think really, the gist of this whole video here is just to explain that, leadership and business should have leaders who care and show that they care. And the ones that don't, they might seem like they're going far in business, but if you look underneath it, it's like all a facade, because they're not genuinely building those relationships, because you need emotion to genuinely build a relationship. And vulnerability, and I know vulnerability in business, it's an iffy subject, but if you think about it, you have to be vulnerable when you're making decisions, because if you take that risk, you're being vulnerable. So when you take that risk, if you're taking that risk in business and saying, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to launch this, we're going to, change this, that's vulnerability. And that's showing that soft part of yourself. That, vulnerability is showing that is opening yourself up to be rejected or to be hurt or to be whatever. And in business, rejected, or the idea is thrown away or doesn't work. The worst case, you open up your vulnerability, you take a risk and it doesn't work. Then you learn from it and then you go forward. So it's really, really important, having like that fine line between, I'm not going to come into work and start crying and be sappy and, involving everybody in my personal business, versus I'm going to come into work and I'm going to be a good leader today. And I'm going to show that I care about my employees or my team. And at the end of the day, that's what makes the business, is the team. Because without it, you have, you're one person yourself, and you can do a lot yourself. I'm doing a lot myself. But at the end of the day, teams are so important, teamwork. And in order to build that team, you really have to show that you care about them and, care about the cause. Like why are we doing this? Like, the why is so important behind things. And I think that is why my sound company was so successful for 8 years. And I still get phone calls and text messages and emails about running sound. And so if you like this video, if you want to hear more, please drop a comment below, subscribe, follow, let me know what you think. And I hope you have an excellent day, night, morning, weekend, whatever it may be. And I'll be on soon again.